Mr. Shipton.
Thank you everybody for such a warm, heartfelt welcome. Who amongst us would not tremble with indignation over the 14-year treatment of Julian Assange, the most vicious hatred, the most unending pursuit, most scurrilous lies and calumnies delivered against a person who had only brought us truthful information. There were we characterise the last election, the last federal election, as an Assange election. All of the teals that were elected as candidates stood on an Assange platform to bring Assange home. The Greens stood on an Assange platform and increased their representation in the House of Representatives by 3. The Prime Minister stood on an Assange platform saying, enough's enough. I don't see the purpose of this ongoing pursuit. Many members of the Labor Party equally stood on an Assange platform. Last week in Bali, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese had the wisdom to mention a journalist in Myanmar, an Australian journalist. He has also the wisdom, after speaking to Xi Jinping, to mention an Australian journalist incarcerated in China. No mention of Julian Assange, despite the fact that Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and his government and many other members of the sovereign majesty of federal parliament were elected on an Assange platform. It's not good enough, Anthony. We want Julian brought back to Australia. I'll just finish with this thing. There are 250,000 in the cable set that was released, 400,000 in the Iraq war files, 90,000 in the Afghanistan war files. 400,000 in the Iraq war files are testimony to the illegal destruction and invasion of Iraq. 1 million people killed. According to Gideon Polya, a researcher at the University of Melbourne, on excess deaths, 7 million people directly affected, murdered over the period of 20 years since the first invasion. 36 million refugees, people who have had their communities destroyed. That's a Brown University study. There must be, hanging above the Middle East, a pall of grief thicker than a thundercloud. To undo that, we Australians insist that the person who brought us the truth of those matters, the absolute truth which it can stand on, knowledge which leads us to understanding and freedom, the person who brought us that Julian Assange be brought home and this persecution stopped. One more thing. These leaks, these revelations that are held on WikiLeaks' website can bring justice and can bring peace. One stopped a war. Really important. I'll just quickly run over that event. 2008, a group of American soldiers went into a house just outside Baghdad and murdered the entire family. The mum, the dad, the babies, the boys and girls, the aunties, the uncles, the grandfather and the grandmother. Looking at this heinous crime, they called in an airstrike and obliterated from the earth all trace of that house and the family that lived within. The United States ambassador to Iraq wrote up that event and sent the cable to the Department of Justice. Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange published the cable. The people of Iraq read it. The parliamentarians of Iraq read it. The institutions of Iraq became aware. And somehow in that wrecked, ruined, destroyed country, those people gathered together the courage to say to the United States, we will not sign the Status of Forces Agreement, which meant that the United States and its allies, shamefully, my country, the United States and its allies had to remove their troops from Iraq. A leak and its publication brought about the end of a war and the beginning of the long process to peace. Thanks, everybody. Free, free, free Assange!